Welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. This morning we unpacking Carnival 2023, and I want to welcome to the set music businessman and music analyst, Mr. Nigel Campbell, as well as the president of BP Renegades, Mr. Colin Greaves, as they join us on set to have this conversation. I feel like we've had this conversation every year, just not on national television.
Yeah,
so,
big time.
I'm excited. The mother of all carnivals, the mother-in-law, the stepmother, whichever mother it is, version it is. I want us to kind of do a simple breakdown, a SWOT analysis even. So we can start with what did you see as the strengths of Carnival 2023? I'll start with you, Nigel.
Music continued. We still had great music, which is excellent. We had a lot of participation by everybody. The bands performed. That is music bands and carnival bands.
Right.
Carnival didn't die, right? I mean, after 2 years.
that's a good thing. That's a strength.
Right? So that there was a continuity in a sense, and there was a small evolution, but there were some major backsteps, and there were some other areas which are not necessarily directly at carnival stakeholders, but in terms of information and media.
All right, so we'll get back to that in a little bit. Colin,
Yes.
well, let me firstly say congratulations to
Thank you
the BP
very much.
Renegades. But tell me the strengths for you of Carnival 2023.
I think one of the major strengths for me was interest. I think this carnival, of course, generated a huge amount of interest, and interest in not just one-off events, not just one type of event, not just one type of person. I think if you look across the board, we've seen higher levels of participation and everything. I could say that it seems as if more people played mass than in recent years. It seemed as if the steel bands had huge followings. It seemed as if the pioneered crawls were packed every night. It seems as if many of these shows that would typically bus for Carnival. That's a whole next topic.
Well, I was going to say, because I heard the promoters complaining that they didn't have the audiences that they usually have.
Well, I think that comes down to managing of a particular expectation. And I think that in recent times, everybody wants to have an event that has 5,000 and 10,000 people. I mean, and the reality is everybody's not Stink and Dirty or Vibes with Voicey or Marshall. I mean, the reality is that we have seen these smaller siloed events being spectacular. I mean, Throwback and Wine, as well as you know, many other more intimate types of experiences. And I think that even from my years of wearing a previous hats when I was at Island People, there became a time when the expectations were that every event would have 6,000 people. And I think now we've seen where they've become a lot more intimate experiences. We're seeing a lot of backyard parties. If you look at the Ticket Federation calendar, on those calendars, there are more events than I've ever seen before. There are literally over 200 events on the calendar. So I think of course, when you now expand into that realm, you're going to get, not every single person is going to score, but when you look at the amount that scores now versus 15 years ago, 10 years ago, definitely there's an uptake in participation.
All right, so Nigel, tell me about the weaknesses that you've seen. I mean, you mentioned communication.
Communication in terms of what the news that got out and things. We know about the famous one on Carnival Tuesday, but even in terms of the Soca Monarch, right?
Right.
The Soca Monarch had a little controversy that came about because of the way that information was brought over to the public.
Or
right?
not brought over,
Or
as the
not
case
brought
may be.
over, right? And I think that is the kind of thing that we need to tighten up on, right? The previous guest was a publicity expert, kind of spoke about that, because I still consider this carnival as part of an industry, right? A part of a creative industry. It's probably the largest sector. But the music part of the carnival industry has to get this stuff up to mark as it was. Right, we're not getting that communication. The communication is not perfect.
Yeah.
And therefore the effects. And we still, although we are in the era of social media, word of mouth still operates in a big way. So that's some of those things are not beneficial to the growth of the industry. Right. I think another overarching thing is in terms of our policies. Right. In terms of our music policy, which the government had a music policy in train that came and went and nobody ever knew about it.
Music or culture policy?
There was a cultural policy which I understand is probably still in draft form.
Yeah,
but
I think it got green paper or white paper or
it was
whichever
green paper,
one.
but it never went any further.
Okay.
But there was a music industry policy, right, that had been created and it had been touted. Some elements were taken out of it, right? But in terms of a larger music industry policy, we have to get our act together in terms of policies so that everybody's on the same page. Stakeholders need some guidance. The industry needs support. Commercial enterprises have to work together. And these are things that are not happening. So there's a lot of hit and miss, a lot of harassment, a lot of that kind of stuff.
And isn't that how the carnival thrives?
Well, that is how Trinidad thrives, if I understand it properly.
And the carnival is an extension of us, so it makes sense, right? But Colin, would you agree, as a publicist yourself, would you agree with what Nigel is saying in terms of poor communication for carnival?
I would think that, yes, I believe that there's a lot of work to be done. I think that finding information sometimes is quite difficult. I mean, if you could task yourself right now and say, I want to find out where to access tickets for something or how to access parking information. I mean, we don't treat every event as it should be treated in terms of the logistics. And I hope you were coming to ask me the question about the weaknesses.
Yes.
Because that's the number one word that I would say, logistics. I think logistically, we've not done a great job across the board. We've taken things for granted. Trinidad Carnival kind of happens. In a previous life, I also would have been on the Parade of the Bands committee. This is many years ago. And I had a behind-the-scenes view of the amount of meetings and consultation and collaboration that would go into understanding the movement of the flow of the Parade of the Bands, for instance. And I think that when we understand holistically that even though you have your carnival band and you might have your steel orchestra and you might have something else, is that holistically, collectively, it's brand Trinidad Carnival. And when in brand Trinidad Carnival, a masquerader who spends $12,000 to come here has a bad experience because they're standing on one spot for 3 hours, that's a logistical problem.
Yeah.
When you have brand Trinidad Carnival where people spend $15,000 and can't get their costume, that's a logistical problem. When you have people who've gotten food issues in bands, that's a logistical problem. And we need to stop looking at all of these things as isolated situations and realize that we need a collective discussion on the logistics.
But how do we get that with private entities and the government chatting?
Well, the private entities are participating in a government-run sector or industry or festival.
But Carnival is inherently anti-government.
Well, who pays for everything? Who implements the marshals? Who pays for the infrastructure building? Who pays for the permits?
So my question would be, is it worth it? Is $147 million, did we see the benefits of that?
Of course. I think we've definitely more than crossed $147 million. I mean, multiply some of the bands that have 6,000 and 7,000 masqueraders by the $6,000 or $7,000 each person pays, and that's just that. I mean, you have
but the 147 was for NCC to do what they did. So we're talking Calypso Fiesta, we're talking the Marsh Crowd, we're talking Kaiso Rama.
One of the things that we have to acknowledge is that the carnival brings in tourists.
Right.
They may be returning nationals, and they spend money, and that turnover in the economy is actually recorded. A lot of the other information is kind of, we guess it and that kind of stuff, but we actually knew 30-something thousand people come every year. They spend close to $300 million in the economy, right? So there's some benefit to having it here, right? But some of the takeaways are logistical, as Colin has said. There's some things that just Carnival, to me, in Port of Spain, is just outgrown the infrastructure.
Right.
We can't widen the streets. But the trucks have gotten bigger, the bands have gotten bigger, the streets are the same size.
But we also see empty streets. We still have bands that don't pass Piccadilly, don't pass downtown. They don't even pass in Tongue and Port of Spain itself at all. They stay in Woodbrook.
And that's where I would say in terms of logistics management, route management. So for instance, right now, the parade of the band seems to be focused on where your lunch stop is. That should be the last thing to figure out. I think that's what happens right now, because everybody has to try to get to their lunch stop before meals spoil or to get masqueraders there by 12, 1 o'clock. Most lunch stops seem to be in that Woodbrook, Sinclair area, because that's where the parks are, right? But on the flip side, think about what you just mentioned. That's going to mean that downtown is going to be empty because nobody's going to want to stay 3-4 hours because you don't know how long it's going to take to get to the Savannah, to cross the stage, to get to said lunch stop. So because of that, many of those bands just avoid those areas. Once upon a time, there was a narrative about crime, but I would often say, the bandits aren't shackled or cemented to a particular area. They walk, like they can get to Woodbrook, they can get to St. James, they can get to anywhere.
They even drive.
They even drive. So to me, from the days when I was at Island People, it was literally, how do we make sure that we move this mammoth of 3,000 masqueraders with 16 trucks or 15 trucks, or now I'm seeing 20-something trucks in bands, and get them to the lunch stop before these 4,000 meals spoil.
Right.
And I think that's one of the major things. And again, is the logistics management. I often say
that's a course.
It's not about, people think managing Carnival is necessarily about managing people. It's about managing trucks, because trucks follow people. People follow trucks.
It's about managing systems also. I'm sure everybody saw the Super Bowl. And the thing about the Super Bowl halftime show is to move a stage that where they begin, the first try to move it on takes an hour.
Yeah.
The day of Super Bowl, it's on and off. It's 6 minutes on, 6 minutes off.
Yep. Yeah.
Those are the kind of systems that we have to actually learn how to do
rehearsals
properly.
allow for those things.
And rehearsals is a thing that seems to be
the national thing that we hate to do.
anathema.
But how do we rehearse for something like Panorama? How do we rehearse for something like the Parade of the Band?
How do you rehearse for the March Gras? How do you rehearse for Calypso Fiesta?
Exactly. That's a million-dollar question.
Well, there's also this kind of understanding that a number of artists don't rehearse. Don't like to rehearse. So there's a lot of attitudes. A lot of attitudes have to be changed because we have to evolve the industry, as I said. What existed in the, like I say, in the 2010s. I don't think that can continue. It should not continue, I should say, going forward into 2024 and going beyond, because as an industry, we have to evolve.
What are the opportunities that we have coming out of Carnival 2023? What do you see? Rehearsal as an opportunity.
I see it. I mean, again, when I was at Island people don't know this. We used to do what we call a truck drive. On Carnival Wednesday at 3 a.m., we used to take all of our trucks and drive the entire route. And that way we would know how long it takes to move, which corners can't be turned by which trucks, what are some of the logistical challenges there. I think there's a great opportunity to relook at the entire festival and see opportunities for how we can rehearse things that can be practiced and tried again. And also the best practices. I mean, there are a lot of people who get it right. But these aren't the people who we rely on for information and consultancy and things like that. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for that as well. And there are also opportunities for greater collaboration. I mean, right now, steel bands operate in a silo. And me being one, I can tell you that. Event managers operate in a silo, and there's the private events, and then there's the governmental side of things, and whatever happens at the NCC, which is another silo. And then you have the silo of the traditional mass, where ask the traditional mass character, how many times have they been engaged by one of the leading all-inclusive band leaders to have a conversation about how we could work together and stuff like that. So I think collaboration is going to be is a great opportunity moving forward.
Nigel?
I think that the other platforms beyond the simple live watching the thing, media, television, broadcasting, streaming, these kind of things. I mean, everybody said that certainly when the pandemic happened, okay, everybody's not going to understand the notion of how to stream an event and how to broadcast and that kind of stuff. A lot of that fell apart. I still think it's viable. It still is a viable entity. I mean, some of these shows, I went to famously, Teddyson John had a show. We actually stripped. We transformed how the soca, how calypsos and the soca was performed. And to me, it was an opportunity to develop a product beyond Carnival and that whole Carnival aesthetic, so that our artists have legs in our location beyond Carnival, as well as have a Carnival vision for carnivals throughout the region and throughout the world. So there are opportunities in terms of developing what can happen, of course, using different platforms.
Definitely. Now, Dr. Joanne Tull said, I saw it in the papers this weekend, if it is that we only go on in a pedantic way as we tend to, it is likely that our mother of all carnivals, as we call it, will be overtaken by its children. What are some of the threats that you guys see coming out of Carnival 2023?
I think, to me, one of the big threats has been this notion. So there's a juncture where tradition and evolution meet or don't meet. Or they run past each other or they don't. And I would often say, because you do something a particular way, because those are the resources available to you at a particular time, doesn't mean that 30 years or 50 years later that it has to be done the same way, because they're new resources. So for instance, we've seen it at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was traditionally done a particular way, and now they had Rihanna on a flying stage in the air. Now, if you were to think about our carnival, how have we evolved it? Where have you seen engineering and stuff? So one of the threats is that we've not evolved as quickly enough, and that we focus so much on doing things the way we've always done it. It's just that we've kind of been stuck in a particular realm. So look at Pan, one of those examples.
And you've been definitely changing that with Renegades. Even the video footage after the panorama, we saw a huge difference. So fantastic job. We have 30 seconds, Nigel. Give me a threat.
Biggest threat is our audiences have to be able to come to Trinidad much easier.
Oh boy.
Oh gosh.
Look where we reach. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this morning and for unpacking a little bit of the carnival. I'm sorry we didn't have much more time to be able to sit and, because we could talk about this for hours. And we have plenty of details that we can delve into a little bit. But I've been chatting with the president of BP Renegades, Mr. Colin Greaves, as well as music businessman and a music analyst, Mr. Nigel Campbell, just unpacking Carnival 2023. Gentlemen, thank you again, and do enjoy the rest of your day. We take a quick break and come back with more. Stay tuned.